right, it is now 4:09 p.m. on March 19th, 2024. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Citizen Appeal Board. We're going to roll right through the agenda. We're starting a little bit late through my own fault, which I apologize to everyone for. We're going to start here with a roll call.
All right. Jason Osborne.
Present.
Dean Pacific.
Present.
Russell Olmsted.
Here.
Doug Maliski, he is out. Reginald Howard is out. Michelle Williams.
Present.
Sophia Brewer.
Here.
And Jordan Cross.
Here.
Gotcha.
All right. Just for the record, my understanding is that with the members in attendance today, we do have a quorum to address the bylaw issue for today. Okay. Moving on to the next item then is the approval of the March 19th, 2025 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Okay. If there's any discussion on that, I open that now. Otherwise, do I hear a motion to approve these minutes?
Just a correction to the date.
Sure.
This is a typo. It's a typo. It should be 2025, not 2024.
Oh, sure. All right. Subject to that correction, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Support.
All right. A discussion? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. We'll do it verbal. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No opposition. The motion passes. Next item is the board liaison report.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. Not a whole lot for today's report. First thing is there are no appeals in the hopper right now. So we are moving forward with the other items of business that the board has. Of note, it's that in May, our board terms generally expire. The clerk's office did contact us. As you all know, there was some changeover in staffing as it relates to who was responsible for that. The clerk that used to handle that is no longer with the organization. So as a result of that, they are pulling that information together so that we can talk about whose terms are up and all of those types of things. If you know that your terms are up and you are interested in serving again, the clerk's office has asked that you go to the webpage where you originally applied and fill out an application again to move forward. So please keep that in mind. Outside of that, just two announcements. One is the expungement fair. The OPA will be hosting this annual expungement fair on May the 3rd. That will be at the Kroc Center. We are looking for attorneys that are interested in volunteering to assist. Really, we're looking for anyone who's interested in volunteering, but definitely attorneys who are interested in volunteering to assist with that process. We will train those who don't work in criminal law normally and may have questions regarding that. You can go to OPA's webpage to sign up to volunteer in any capacity. For that, please spread the word with your networks either way. Let people know that this is a free process. We want to help as many people as possible. In addition to that, the Grand Rapids Neighborhood Summit will be hosted on May 17th for OEE. We'll be putting that on. That will be at the GVSU Pew campus downtown. Of course, that is also a completely free event. Super excited about it. We are I think it's going to be an amazing summit this year. There's been some great workshop proposals that have been submitted. So please be on the lookout for that and also share that with your networks. With that, that concludes my report.
All right. I have a couple comments in that report. First of all, we've discussed this on this board before. The lack of appeals coming through is it's hard to interpret. You know, on one hand, the lack of reports seems to indicate that our law enforcement is doing their job appropriately and no one has any complaints. On the other hand, through past appeals, concerns have been raised that there may be a chilling effect on citizens exploring their right. Anyone that might be watching this either live or on a repeat obviously should be aware of their rights and that the fact that this board exists to review any officer complaints and should not feel reluctant to come forward if they have those complaints. On the other hand, if there is legitimately no concerns about our police department, then I'm glad to hear that. The other thing I wanted to comment on is the expungement fair. I did get that notice. I did that last year. I intend to do it again this year. It's a great program, a great opportunity to volunteer, not just for lawyers, but for anyone that wants to help out. There's positions for anyone that wants to come in and participate in that. I would encourage anyone that has the time to do so. All right, with no further discussion on that, move on to the next item, which is number 5, old business.
I don't believe we have any old business.
Okay. Then moving on to number 6 is the proposed bylaw amendment. It's been a long time coming. We've been working on this for a while, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we've gone through all the necessary procedures, and today is our final discussion and vote on the passage of this bylaw.
My understanding, yes.
Let me ask the board to ensure that everyone has had an opportunity to review and read the proposed change to the bylaw. I think we have a single change proposed. And if anyone has any comments, discussions, concerns, I would open the floor to that now.
Would you be willing, Mr. Chair, to just describe the bylaw change for the benefit of those who are in the audience or may be watching?
Sure. I hope I have a copy in front
We
of
have
me.
a copy to read.
Bit rush coming here today. Okay.
Anybody else? Thank you.
All right, the proposed change pertains to bylaw 2.10 and is in regards to training for primarily new members, but also for existing members of the board. It's been the practice in the past for new members coming on to the board to undergo a series of training events to apprise them of the police procedure and policy, as well as the governing standards, including these bylaws, as well as the applicable city codes, state statutes, and other general legal requirements. That has been handled through a generally informal process. The purpose of this proposed change to the bylaws is the addition of a bylaw which codifies this practice as a requirement. The new bylaw reads as follows. New board members upon appointment shall receive training in areas relevant to their service to this board. Areas of training include but are not limited to civil rights, law enforcement, use of force policies, city policies, internal affairs policies and procedures, and public service employment law. This list is neither exhaustive nor mandated as to what training must be performed. Existing members shall receive remedial training as deemed necessary by the board. I'll note one thing that stands out is it uses very permissive language and is very open-ended. Through the subcommittee that put this together, that was by design, so that we're not locked into any particular training, nor are we we're not precluded from offering any other training that might come up as necessity arrives. So it's a fluid provision, but one that provides a little more force than just the informality that we've been dealing with to date of new people coming in and offering them the training that we'd like them to have to be able to function on this board. So with that, is there any other further questions or discussions about this proposed change to the bylaws? Yeah.
So the one thing I note about this is that it says existing members shall receive remedial training as deemed necessary by the board. Traditionally, that what training looks like has been developed by staff. And I think I would suggest that we include language that says either the board and staff or something to that effect. Again, so it doesn't look like this is only a board design training, because that's not how it happens in operation, or at least it's not how it has happened in operation.
Okay. So my that is an aspect that I know the OPA has offered training. Essentially, when we have new board members coming on, they offer that to the new board members, but then also open that up to the board as a whole for remedial training or just another opportunity to view the training again. I think as far as the purpose and function of this proposed bylaw, I think I'm happy to let that proceed as an informal process. I think this was the written language of this bylaw and that last sentence that you're referring to more pertains to a member who perhaps is demonstrating unfamiliarity with necessary aspects of training that the board would then take action to ask them to return for remedial training. That was my interpretation. I would open up to the members and members of the subcommittee in particular if they have any other interpretations or thoughts.
From my perspective, as far as the reasoning behind keeping it in the wording that we had as the subcommittee was around the idea that the OPA's stewardship since coming on and being the liaison for this board has, in my experience, been very well done. Prior to that, there wasn't as great coordination on some of these trainings and efforts. And allowing the board to have direct input on these trainings, I think, is important, especially making sure that if there are things that the board does not believe it is getting, that they can, for training that is necessary, that it has the ability within its bylaws to be able to work, have it spelled out that they have the ability to be able to work with it. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to saying, for myself, from my perspective, I wouldn't be opposed for it, saying that it would the board as well as staff, like in conjunction together, possibly having that in there. I'm not sure that, I don't think I would be opposed to that, but I do want to make sure that this is about giving the board the autonomy and the control that it needs to ensure that it can control, well, I shouldn't say control, have the ability to speak to what they believe is necessary to be flexible and adapt to what trainings may need to be given to the board, depending on what the board is overseeing.
If I may, completely understand the position. I don't think the end precludes the board from doing anything. I think my concern is that there are things that may arise that staff may be aware of that are outside of the board's purview for one reason or another. There could be new training tactics or things of that nature that come up, or concerns that may cause a decision of the board to be less enforceable in arbitration. The staff may be aware of, and therefore we recommend these trainings, which is really, if we're honest, how we got to the point of really building out trainings in the first place. So that's why I am suggesting the language, but I respect the board's ability to make its decision.
I would say that OPA would have the ability to do that regardless of this provision, because that's what's been doing to this point anyways, even without the bylaw governing it. So I don't think this bylaw either, it neither authorizes nor prohibits what you're proposing. And I'll echo Mr. Olmsted to say that I think the training that's been provided by OPA to date, since I've been on the board, has been excellent. And I would not only support but encourage that continued behavior. I don't think this gets in the way of that.
Can I just say, I just have a kind of a procedural question too, and this may be for the city attorney, but it's a board bylaw we're voting on. In a board bylaw, can we put obligations on the staff or grant rights to the staff? I guess my knee-jerk reaction is to think that's not where that gets done, right? Maybe the city commission would be the one to govern city employees, but this is a board bylaw for how the board operates. That was the only procedural concern I had.
Yeah, I guess from a practical standpoint, the board's going to have to work together with the city staff because, to be frank, you guys don't have any money. And the ability to deliver trainings is going to be dependent on city staff and resources. So under that natural relationship, there's a little bit of a requirement that the two groups work together, whether it's said or unsaid. I could envision an additional sentence that would say that the Civilian Appeals Board shall work with the city staff to identify and deliver trainings as described in this bylaw, but the reality is that's going to have to be a natural working relationship, whether it says it or not.
And I guess part of my reticence comes from, I mean, I appreciate the comments and concerns. Part of my reticence comes from is that it's been a long road to get to this point here. If we're going to change language of it at this point, then I think we have to go back to the procedure, repost it, and address this at another day, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll let Councilman.
I don't think so. I think that the intent to change the bylaw puts it on the table for discussion, and you could be super precautionary. I don't envision any circumstance where someone's going to file a motion for a injunction because CAB followed a maybe less than perfect procedure to amending the bylaws, but that's more of my own personal risk analysis. I'm not suggesting you do it wrong. I don't think that the current process is that prescriptive about restarting the process, but, you know, do what you guys want to do.
My last point, and I'm sorry, I feel I need to be a little more explicit about my concern, which is I don't want the bylaw to be interpreted as if CAB decides what its training is on its own, issues decisions on its own without the professional guidance of staff. That is my concern. I know that's not how it would work in practice with this CAB. But again, when we make rules and policy, it's not for the people we're working with at the moment. It's for the future. And it's also for others who may be concerned about what this board is doing. So I'll leave it at that.
And I just want to say, for procedural purposes, that I would like for everybody to raise their hand so they can be recognized by the chairperson before they speak, because there are several of us that have been waiting to speak and haven't been able to. So please.
I'm so sorry. I've been doing this in a formal way, and let me correct that now. So is there anyone else that would like to be recognized this time?
Yes, please.
Yes, go ahead. I apologize for missing.
No, that's fine. I was waiting. I would concur with Brandon. My initial read of this is who defines relevance, and I am concerned that if there isn't something stated in here as to which parties are actually at the table to define that we put ourselves at risk as a board. And so I would agree with Brandon and Phil about adding an additional sentence to clarify that.
I guess let me ask this concern. I mean, the concern, if I'm understanding correctly, is that a board might decide they want training in a particular area that is objectively not important, and then this bylaw authorizes them to do that. Is that kind of what we're getting at here, or what?
Or vice versa, that the board would deem something as unnecessary that was of particular relevance. And again, there's no statement in this as to who defines that relevance. So we then would have a bylaw that was inadequate to determine the outcome of a situation. By stating in there that it's in collaboration, that everybody's working together, that these can be identified by either the city or the board, I think these are really important things. And especially if I think back to when I came on board, we were just starting a lot of these trainings. I would have had no idea what to ask for as a new member. And our board members turn over regularly. And there could be a time where there's not a single person on this board that's been on the board before. And if our bylaws don't state that we have shared accountability on determining what is relevant, I think we're at risk.
Anyone else before we get back to Russell? He's gone. Go ahead, Russell.
I would also ask Phil for if there's been one time where there has been a decision, in my experience, where there's been a decision by this board that has gone to arbitration. If we leave this open-ended and don't have it formalized, to speak to Michelle's perspective, if we leave this open and don't have it formalized with city staff, does that open up? Could that potentially open up an avenue to where a decision that this board makes can be overturned in arbitration because of not having clear defined training practices in the bylaws?
Go ahead, Phil.
I would say that I believe there have been two historically, one more recently, that have gone to arbitration and had a decision that was inconsistent with a CAB action. That was more about citing the reasons for the decision and less about training. The city commission policy doesn't require the board to undergo training. So I don't sense that arbitration decisions would be dependent on the training that was received. I do think it lends integrity to the decisions. It helps the board feel confident and prepared to make good decisions, which might reduce the potential for a case to go to arbitration if you've been trained on how to look forward and see, what the impact of your decisions might be and all the different roles and responsibilities that are impacted by the decisions. So I think that you reduce the risk that a case goes to arbitration if you're well-trained and up to date with all the board members being trained. And before hearing a case, all the board members that have joined since this, I say it's newer, but it's really in the last 6 years. So since we've been doing that training, all the board members have been pretty respectful about waiting to participate in decision-making until that training. And I guess because of the cadence of the cases, we've had the luxury of time between cases to do that in a meaningful way. But I don't think that whatever this says would open it up to higher likelihood of arbitration overturning CAB decisions.
I guess I would like to just thank you for that. I'm not sure that I think I think I agree with you that I seem to remember, and I know we can't. I seem to remember something in the finding around training from that arbitration, but I can't remember for sure. And so I worry that if we don't put clarification around there, that it could open up, as I think I absolutely agree, that it could open up an avenue for if this board ever does overrule, or I shouldn't say overrule, disagree with the findings of an internal investigation. I would hate to see this bylaw be the possibility because of that phrasing. And if that phrasing doesn't preclude the board from still having say within its in the ability to be able to have autonomy, to be flexible and move to other types of trainings and ask to the city staff to help us with that type of training, I don't see the adverse effect of adding some sort of clarity to it just to protect the board moving forward. But I would also like to say I agree with you, Jason, that I don't want to risk that we can't get this passed today, right? Because we've been working towards this for a long time. So I also want to be sensitive towards that.
The one point I wanted to add to Russell's question, or Mr. Olmsted's question, is that while I can't speak to whether or not it was in the findings, it's been a while, I do know that training was a subject that was argued, that was raised as an issue, which is one of the reasons that training became a very pertinent issue for this board as we move forward. I can't recall if it was in the findings or not. The other thing I was going to say is maybe an option is to strike the language that says by the board, which leaves it open to either being the board or staff. I don't know what the board's position on that is, but that may be another way to get to it.
Yes.
So I have a totally different concern.
Okay.
So not concerned, but just want to ask that we reconsider civil rights, not because civil rights is not important, but just because the phrase has been weaponized by our current government. And, the phrase has been weaponized in a way. And I think it would be stronger if we said constitutional rights, because civil rights is constitutional rights. And I'm just wondering if there is any thought about that, just because of current conversations and current decisions that are being made around certain terms and phrases.
Let me jump back in here about appreciate all the comments so far. Let me just walk this back a little bit to the original concern that was raised, and that being this final sentence here. I suppose my concern lies in if we're just bear with me. I'm thinking how to phrase this. Ms. Williams, I appreciate your concerns about kind of this power struggle and who has the authority to do what. I guess I look at that and say if we're going to strike by the board from this last sentence or add OPA to the sentence, then what we're doing is we're adding more power and influence from effectively an outside entity as to what this board could and should do. That I think serves to strengthen and create a power, whereas without it, it's simply the way it's always been operating, is that it's a suggestion influence. I agree. I think there's a concern with when the entire board turns over and we have completely inexperienced people up here that don't know what they need. This provision is written doesn't prevent OPA from coming in and saying, this is what we've done in the past, we suggest you do this, and the board making a decision of saying, yeah, we think that's valuable and we should do that. You know, I think that there's a power struggle no matter how we frame this. But as it's written, I would propose to the board that this leaves it open-ended and really empowers the board to do nothing more than what it already has the power to do, and doesn't take or create or remove powers from any other entity to do what they've been doing to date anyways. So I may as well address the concerns from Ms. Brewer about the use of the term civil rights. I certainly appreciate that we're in an era where terms become loaded and carry meanings which were never intended in their original purpose. You know, my background, my experience as an attorney says that the phrase civil rights has a very specific legal connotation to it. It's a term of art, and one that you know, in my profession, I hope transcends those kind of political waves. You know, not to say, I mean, I certainly appreciate your concerns, and I think there's certainly merit to it. But frankly, I mean, whether it's civil or constitutional, I think you're right. I think it gets to the same point. So I guess I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. So. Sure.
I guess as pertaining to civil rights, I believe within the 800-02 for the description of what this board is and what cases it can hear, that's the term that's used. Yeah. And so from when we were trying to place this in here, we were trying to stay consistent with what the board was actually designed by from the city and use that same terminology. But I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it says civil rights within that. Okay.
Yeah, I'll quickly add, I think that's true. We have this very particularized list here, and I'm sure we pulled that wholesale from other provisions of pertaining to this board.
I
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to go back to also the first line of conversation regarding the last sentence and using the example in which supposing that, that we had a whole new board and the fact that OPA would be able to make suggestions to that board. If a board doesn't know or hasn't been privy to the use of force policy, privy to city policies, privy to any of those things, and what if they vote all those things down, then why, then how are they really serving the community. And so just thinking about what is possible, and while I want this board to have some autonomy, I want this board to be able to stand on its own and not necessarily have to be restricted or under the overhead of the city. I also see the fact that this board has, as Attorney Strong mentioned, we have no money. And so suppose and there's no funding source for this board other than under that umbrella of OPA. And so thinking about those things, I'm thinking that, having the board and OPA listed as as the authorities for suggesting training is important.
So, taking your example, let's say we all get replaced next month, the month after, with all new board members. I think your concerns are the same for that board. A whole new board comes in, Mr. Davis comes in and says, we have our members go through this training, we do these aspects, and the board collectively says, no, we're not going to do that. I don't see any difference as far as them being able to do that on their own under the current bylaws. I don't think this bylaw empowers the board to do more than what they can already do under the current circumstances. In fact, on the contrary, I would say that this bylaw would obligate the board to engage in some form of training. What that form takes under the board's wisdom of that era, I guess we got to leave that open to them. But it really, I really don't see a meaningful change in the structure that has historically occurred, where OPA recommends training, the board participates in that as per the recommendation, and when it comes to power differentials and what the board is empowered to do, frankly, I think this, if anything, that this proposed amendment would be more likely to result in additional relevant training. I'll share my personal feelings on this. When I first came on the board, I went through the training processes, which were more or less exclusively through the Grand Rapids Police Department. Mm-hmm. I was struck by the fact that there was not training from the point of view of the citizens and community, from the other perspective, so to say. I think we could, as a board independently, as it stands now, under the current bylaws, get together and say, we think this other training is relevant and we'd like everyone to participate in it. I think that this bylaw empowers the board to take a more affirmative step towards that. Be my position.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, let me say too, anyone that has a comment should feel free to jump in. I think if we have a lot of people interrupting and talking over each other, then I can kind of become the dictator for this. But at this point, I just want to treat this like a conversation. And everyone here, I think, is very respectful. And I'm going to rely on everyone's decorum to move the conversation forward without raising hands, calling names.
I can. So just kind of thinking back, and I was flipping through my notes, and we started this conversation back in 2021 around the need to have the bylaws reflect the importance of the training. And I think from that point in time, it has always been a shared effort with, our partners in OPA. And I'm going to restate what I said before. Having something that doesn't define relevance or doesn't define who decides what is relevant inherently is problematic. And so I fully support that we need to have something that talks about the training. But already this is, as you stated from the beginning, it's extremely passive. There's no mandated training. There's nothing that articulates what I would say the discussions have been for the last 4 years, right? And I'm okay with it being a little bit more vague in that list if we have something that defines who decides what is relevant. Without a specific list or a definition of who decides what's relevant, I don't know that I can support this if this is going to be what governs the work that I'm volunteering to do, because it's too nebulous for me.
And I agree that it is different from the intent even when speaking on behalf of being a part of the subcommittee that was looking into this and proposing different language. When we had started, it was much more specific. The idea was to be more specific about the trainings. And I'm just pointing this just for to give an idea of what the subcommittee had talked through the process. When we talked through the process on it, it was we did not want to create a situation to where we could not, by describing specific trainings, that therefore we could not have autonomy to decide more trainings as things change, because practices, policy and protocol of the GRPD and policing in general changes on a yearly basis, on sometimes much faster than that. And so having the ability to be able to change along with that was something that we were concerned about, and we didn't want to create something that would cause more problems. My intent from personal standpoint, my intent when thinking about the necessity to have bylaws that describe our training is because we have nothing that's there. And the original intent, I know for me, was from concern from arbitration. I wanted to make sure that we had things, something in place. The intent for me was the idea of around having something in place that would protect the board's decisions in arbitration. And I agree, though, that in its current wording, I worry that without having some sort of decision on who has authority on deciding those things, because it could be concerning in arbitration. I know, and I respect completely, and thank you, Phil, for that. But to restate what I was saying earlier, we are volunteers on this board, and not everybody on this board has a legal background, and because of that, our trainings are necessary to make sure that we understand policy, practices, procedures, and are well versed in them, so that when we make a decision, it's a sound decision, and that it can stand up in arbitration. And I think that in order to do that, we must make clear. I do think that we must make clear that that both the board, along with staff, have this on here rather than just on the board's autonomy, because we are, at the end of the day, volunteers. And I do think that could open us up to where any decisions that this board makes could be problematic in arbitration. It doesn't have to be something, we can look at this and talk out some ideas on here, because there are a bunch of ways that we could word this. To allow the board to still have its own autonomy and still be able to have control, and not tie the hands, but also include specificity that it will be within a partnership with the city staff. I don't think that we should, on that note, I don't think that we should say OPA, only because I hope that OPA stays around. I hope OPA is always the liaison for this board, but that may not be the case. That can change depending on what the city commission decides, or what happens with budgetary decisions, who knows. So I think that we need to make sure that that if we have that wording in there, that it's with maybe not city staff, but with the board liaison to the city, so that it is around that sort of partnership.
Phil, sorry.
Go ahead.
A lot of great conversation here. I want to compliment you for having a good governance approach to this. I would make a couple comments, and at the end of my couple of comments, make a suggestion that you refer it back to committee. It sounds like there's a decent amount of work. There's not a case that's pending that requires this bylaw to be enacted today. I know the committee is anxious to get this approved, but I always err on the side of doing things right and not doing things fast, although fast might not be the right adjective for this particular work. So consider that. The board can make a motion to refer it back to committee to hear some of the concerns that were raised, and then the committee can come back with version 2.0 that does or does not, and you can continue that conversation. I would hope that the committee would hear some of those concerns and think through it, and you can do that with a little bit more time and frankness if you take it off the dais and do that work in a committee. I did look back at the arbitration, Russell. You are right, there was a mention, not a binding decision component, but there was a mention that the Civilian Appeals Board did not receive training specific to ICE. And the nature, as I'm sure you'll remember, was an ICE type of investigation and the involvement of GRPD in that particular situation. The arbitration was ultimately ruled that the CAB report did not provide evidence justifying overturning the IAU exoneration conclusion. And so that was the ultimate conclusion with a pre-recognition that there was no ICE-specific training on that case. And I say that because the dynamics of law enforcement are so, I guess, the profession of law enforcement and how it exists in our community is so dynamic, from the use of technology to the different federal, state, local players that might be involved. And this board is and always will be part of the city. I know that's been a source of somewhat discomfort, and there's this idea that maybe the Civilian Appeals Board should be autonomous and not part of the city, and to get true civilian oversight into policing, there needs to be a complete separation of Civilian Appeals Board and the city, but that's not how it works in Grand Rapids today. And so to try to ignore that fact, I would caution against thinking that this board is completely autonomous or has some sort of responsibility independent of the city. It only exists because the City Commission has a policy 800-02 that enables it to do this work that's not state authorized. And so hopefully you don't feel discouraged by including the city in your bylaws under those circumstances. And finally, the idea of not being so specific on OPA and so specific in the types of training, I think, is good, because we don't know what technology is going to be in the future. But I don't know what that perfect language is, and I would encourage the committee to maybe think through that, how to issue a statement that the board could feel comfortable with. But wanted to give a little bit of update after looking up that arbitration decision and hearing some of that conversation. From my experience, it sounds like a good opportunity to refer it back to committee and come back in a month and take a look at 2.0, but there may be a desire to go get my kids from school that is urging that as well.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question? Phil, I know you serve and support us as the attorney. If we were to use language such as, the board liaison or, to the committee or whatever, that would not necessarily include you or whatever attorney was assigned to us in terms of who would be written to provide what was relevant for, whatever, kind of back to.
Yeah, I think there has to be a collaborative process, and to Jason's recollection, we do have a pretty robust OPA training that provides some, I would say, alternative visions of how policing came to be in the community, which is not in opposition of the police department, but I think gives a different lens and intentionally does so. And so some of those subjects we've tried to embrace to the best extent possible, and then certainly focus on use of force. And then the goal would be, if there are unique elements to pending cases, we roll out a training in real time as quickly as we can on topics like ICE and local police department operating agreements. If we don't, I don't want to inflate current national positions on that, because our police department has made some revisions to try to not give the impression that there's a responsibility for immigration investigations or other citizenry things. So talking myself in circles, but hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, that was what I wanted to know. Thank you.
If I may, I want to be clear about one of the points that came up was that nothing in this bylaw will preclude OPA or staff to take action. I don't read this that way. When I read the last line, it says what existing members shall receive remedial training as deemed necessary by the board. And by not mentioning someone else, I think is exclusionary. It reads as if it's excluding others from making a decision, although I don't believe that's its intent, and I know that's not how it was operated in the past, which is why I raised the point initially. It's simply that part of the language that, to me, reads as precluding someone else, or at least there's an argument that it's precluding someone else from offering that training. That's why I raised that point. I think if that part of the language was removed, from my perspective, this is much less objectionable, because it reached the point of saying training will be provided to board members, and these are the types of training, although it doesn't preclude either group from being a part of doing that. So if the language by the board was stricken, I think this positions it it aligns much more closely to what I'm hearing from the board. Although maybe it's not perfect, I think it gets to the point of we want to make sure the board is well trained. We are not saying that the board can't give suggestions on it, and we're not saying that OPA can't give suggestions regarding it, and it would allow you to still move forward. So if it's the will of the board not to send it back to committee, which I saw some of your faces at that suggestion, I would encourage you to strike that language. I would also just add one more point. We've been having very robust discussion, which I think is great, but there was no motion to move it forward before discussion either. So as a matter of procedure, if your intent is to move forward in that way, that's something else to consider.
Well, my intent was to have discussion so that we can formulate a motion with particularized language. So, let me turn this back to Ms. Williams. Does striking the last three words "by the board" alleviate your concerns on this?
That's what I was just wondering.
And does anyone? And I'm open up to the whole board. I mean, is that striking of that phrase create any issues or solve any concerns you have?
For me, I would not be in favor of striking the language. I would want to add clarity. As far as deemed necessary by the board in partnership with the board liaison for the city. Something along those lines. Perhaps partnership is the wrong word, maybe a different word in there, but adding into that line rather than striking it completely would be my view.
And let me say, I want to continue this discussion. I mean, notwithstanding people pick up their kids, because we can send this back to the subcommittee, but we're going to be guessing at what people want. I think this is a great opportunity to discuss, direct concerns and proposed language changes here. So
if I may, I think I'm fine with striking, by the board. I can go either way on that. I'm not sure the question of who defines the relevance is actually dealt with in the passage. And the first paragraph is about new board members, and the and that last sentence is about existing board members. So, which, again, I think by removing that, that's fine, but I still think we need somewhere within this, not limited to a particular group being new or existing, that there has to be something to define who creates that relevance. And I think it was Phil who had suggested a sentence kind of at the bottom of it that would be like inclusive of this. So from my perspective, I think sending it back to committee to work on just zhuzhing that just a little bit to figure out like how do we define or who defines relevance within this. For me, I'm still missing that aspect of it because it's not really anywhere. That's my thought.
I guess I would say, but relevance is it's going to be up to the people involved with this, which is the board or the liaison.
Then just say that. Yep. Then just say all those groups. I was thinking, exactly. Again, this governs us, so I think it is important that it is clear what we mean by that.
Any other thoughts?
I guess I would just say, I agree with Phil. I mean, it's more important to get it right than to get it fast with no cases pending. And I think there's just enough, relatively minor concerns. I mean, the concepts are important and big picture, but the way we can address them doesn't take a lot of extra work. It's adding a sentence or modifying a sentence. And so, I would support referring it back to the committee and having it come back next meeting.
All right. Anything else?
And let me just add, I mean, with great appreciation for all the work that went into it. I don't want, I don't want that to be. I know how much work has gone into this, and so I don't want to sell that short. So I do appreciate the work of the committee. So
Let me be clear. The only thing I feel from this discussion today is appreciation that you guys are involved in this, right? I don't take any kind of offense to having put this together, and you're right. We want to get this right rather than get it done. Right.
And thank you for saying that, because that's it's exciting to be at this point since we've literally been talking about it for 4 years. So just much appreciation and gratitude for even just being able to talk through some of these major issues. So thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, as a follow-up from OPA, I know that there was only because it pertains to one of the concerns that was brought up around this as far as membership within the bylaws being that we can lose all members at once on this board because of how everything is set up to renew. There was a letter that was sent from the chair to the city manager regarding our concern on that. And I'm wondering if we have heard anything back as far as communication that could lend us some sort of understanding of how the city staff or how the city and the city manager feels on those concerns of the board.
I'll say procedurally, we're dealing with another issue right now. If you get a quick answer, then by all means. But I don't want to get too deviated from what we're talking about here.
The answer is I don't have an update regarding that, and I can follow up.
Perfect.
May I move to send this back to subcommittee?
That is your prerogative to make
All
that
right.
motion.
Let's get her done.
All right. Do we have a second?
support.
All right. We'll do another verbal vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
You only did that because you knew it was going to pass. Any other opposition? All right, just the single opposition. Okay, then that motion to send the bylaw back to subcommittee for some redrafting passes. And I believe that takes care of that portion of the agenda. Moving on to our next item is open discussion. Anyone have anything else you want to talk about? Okay, I see none. We'll move then to public comment. We do have someone in the audience today. No notes. Okay. All right. All right, seeing no further comment, I think that brings us to the end of our agenda, which is adjournment. We are adjourned.